This week on the WriterCon podcast.
My piece of advice, and it is a question I've had before, so I do have an answer more or less at the ready. My piece of advice would be, if you want to make a career out of writing, you have to be professional about your writing. And that means you need to ring fence the time that you intend to spend, and don't let other distractions the rest of your life kind of get into that time. If you were in a job, you wouldn't just get up and leave your desk to have a coffee with a friend. You need to be as professional in your writing as you would do in any other job.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Rene Gutteridge, best-selling author of over 30 novels and screenplays.
Hello, writers. I hope by now you've settled into the new year and got your writing plan mapped out, and you're scribbling away on your daily writing schedule. But even if you're not that far along yet, I'm glad you're here. And who knows, you may hear something in the next few minutes that gives you the final puzzle piece you've been needing to get started on whatever writing project is going to be next in your life. Rene, how far along were you as a writer before you had developed a regular writing habit?
Probably 20 years.
Was it like 40 books or something?
Yes. Well, I tell you this, and this is absolutely true. When you're a mom, your writings, you cannot, you have to be flexible. So every week my writing schedule changed depending on what was going on. So I would map it out, but it depended on the week. You know, did we have school activities? Did somebody have the flu? You know, whatever. So it was always changing. And now that they've flown the coop, it's finally nailed down.
But you had a regular schedule. It was just fluid, depending upon.
It was fluid. That's a good term.
Who had dance lessons or whatever, right?
Well, I always had to hit a word count. That was the deal. So if I had to work Friday night at 10 p.m. to hit that, then that's what I did.
Don't you think that helped you? And I mean, speaking for myself, after I quit practicing law, I was at home with 3 kids. And I think developed the talent to be able to write anywhere, anytime, no matter what's going on.
Any circumstance. Absolutely. You just got to do it. And I've written with the flu myself. You know, you just plug yourself up with Theraflu and you got to do it. So it's just how you do it.
Hey, Jesse, am I right in thinking you're about to go on a cruise?
Yes, we are less than 2 weeks away from my second Star Trek cruise. So very excited about that.
Not quite as cool as the WriterCon cruise, but you're coming on that one too, right?
I'm also coming on the Writer cruise too. I'm very excited for that. Both very chill in very 2 different ways. So
no doubt. Well, after you finished hobnobbing with Shatner and those guys, you'll come join our cruise and have actual fun, right?
Yes.
What's he going to say?
A lot of hot tub time just with different kinds of people, both of whom I like. So it's going to be great.
Perfection. All right. Today, our guest is Lexie Elliott, who wrote The French Girl, which was published by Berkley back in 2018. She's subsequently followed that up with The Missing Years and How to Kill Your Best Friend. But now her 4th psychological thriller, Bright and Deadly Things, has been released just a few days ago on Valentine's Day, and we're going to be talking to her about her spectacular writing career and this great new novel after the news. But first, we have a word from Kevin Tumlinson at Draft2 Digital. You have heard us brag on Draft2 Digital many times if you've listened to this podcast, and heard us recommend them for book distribution. This time, you get to hear it straight from Kevin. Take it away, Kevin.
Hi, this is Kevin Tomlinson with Draft2 Digital. Ebooks are amazing, but there's just something about having your book in print. That's why we built D2D Print. We take care of you with free layout templates and formatting, and we can convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound print cover automatically. Come check out D2D Print and all the cool tools we've built for you. Find out more at draft2digital.com.
News story number one. We've got new sales reports in from NPD Bookscan rather. And just to refresh everyone's memory, this is primarily a point of purchase data collection organization. So it's going to primarily focus on brick and mortar stores and print books. Anyway, coming out of this most recent period, does this surprise anyone? The romance market was the leading growth category by a huge percentage and drove overall gains in the entire adult fiction market. Have we mentioned TikTok recently? I think we have. And it is a fact. Authors featured on Book Talk, which is the bookish section of TikTok, drove the lion's share of this fiction growth. And most of those Book Talk bestsellers are backlist meaning older titles. The front list is the new books that have just come out. Backlist are the older titles, which in the past, pre-Amazon, were sometimes hard for readers to find. Well, now backlist sales are about 70% of all print sales, at least as measured by Bookscan. So what's the takeaway, authors and publishers for that matter? Clearly, this is an opportunity to capitalize, perhaps even repackage backlist fiction for a new generation of readers growing up on Book Talk and elsewhere. Rene, you like me, you've been at this for a while. You will remember when backlist titles once upon a time were hard to find, and now much less so. People can discover a new author and actually find their previous books. I think this is a big improvement, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the death knell when you got on the backlist. It was like, oh no,
right, forget
it. Yeah, I'll tell you something I've noticed. When I'll get messages, almost always direct messages, they're all young readers that have discovered my book. They're young. So
you mean
that's been really exciting.
Like online?
What's that?
When you say direct messages, you mean online?
Right, online from Instagram.
Like they're not typing letters and mailing them to you.
No, I haven't gotten a handwritten letter in quite a while.
No, my mother doesn't even do that. Come on.
Right, that gets creepy when that happens. But yeah, so it's been really fun to have them discovered by younger readers. So I think that's a direct result of it. Yep.
Yeah, cool. All right, news story number 2. Harper Collins is reducing their staff. You may recall previous stories about the walkout and striking workers at Harper Collins. Well, they settled the strike, but guess what? Now many of them have been fired. Harper has reduced its staff. 5% of its employees in North America have either been terminated or will be terminated by the end of the current fiscal year, which ends on June 30. In a memo to employees, the HarperCollins CEO Brian Murray wrote that the sales surge that the industry and HarperCollins experienced during the pandemic, has, quote, slowed significantly as of late, end quote. In other words, once again, traditional publishing seems to be shrinking. But let's move on to news story number 3, because this is the one I really am anxious to talk about. You may have already heard this headline story breaking in the book world. The story actually broke just after we recorded our last episode, which is why it wasn't mentioned. But in a way, that's a good thing. but we didn't get to it immediately because in the days and even a week or so after the story first broke, we've learned a great deal more about it. Here's what I'm talking about. An author has reappeared more than 2 years after news of her death. Fans and friends of the romance writer Susan Meakin grieved after someone claiming to be her daughter posted in her Facebook fan group, this is back in September of 2020, that she had died by suicide after being bullied online. Well, a couple weeks ago, the author announced that she was still very much alive. Quote, I debated on how to do this a million times and still not sure if it's right or not, she posted. There's going to be tons of questions and a lot of people leaving the group, I'd guess, but my family did what they thought was best for me, and I can't fault them for it, end quote. As you might imagine, this left some people puzzled or not baffled, and in some cases, people are seriously angry. Jesse, you got any ideas about what's going on here?
So wait, did her family out her? Like the way she frames that, like she's like, my family thought, doing what they thought was best. Like, did the family out her, or did she out herself?
I think
no,
family,
I think she's saying
her
I think
family
she's suggesting that the family put out word, made her inactive online, but now after 2 years of not really being dead, she's speaking up. That was the impression I got. Is that what you got, Rene?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, again, it's probably exhausting pretending to be dead. Like, that's actually not that easy to do in an interconnected world the way we have it. Like was she driving around?
Nobody
was she buying
verified
things?
the story,
right?
Yeah.
Like, was she buying things with her credit card? Like, it's yes, like rural Tennessee, a little easier to drop off the grid. I've been to rural Tennessee; it's possible, but it's such a strange story because, like, as we were talking off air about this, like, this is probably great for her book sales, but also it didn't seem like she really wanted to come back into the spotlight. So I'm very curious about what happens next. And I can understand her fans and especially her friends who thought she was dead, being pretty upset. But
Well, I go ahead.
I was going to say, like, the internet can be an immensely cruel place, and I can certainly see wanting to pretend to be dead instead of interacting with it.
Well, we had this mention of online bullying, and as you were said, I think some people were suggesting it was some kind of stunt. Whatever the reason, clearly the reaction to this basically fraud was negative. And then about a week after the story first, the New York Times did an exclusive profile of this author, and we learned that she'd read romance novels all her life, sometimes more than one a day, always voracious reader, dropped out of school in the 9th grade to marry, and discovered the online romance community, which was a big revelation and originally apparently a source of strength and support. During the next 3 years, she published 14 novels, but also maintained a near constant social media presence. I shouldn't say but also, and also maintained a heavy social media preference. The article also said that she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which of course, as you know, is characterized by periods of manic activity alternating with depression. And according to the author of the piece, the book world made her disorder worse. She said the writing sent her into a manic state, and all these conflicts on the fan pages left her seething. I don't know, Rene. The Times article clearly suggests that this is all down to the toxic online community. What do you think happened?
Well, I think there's clearly a mental disorder that's wrapped up into all of this, but I do think it's an important lesson for all of us in the writing world. And I'm going to share something I have that sits on my desk all the time. It says, writing is what I do, not who I am. right? Like we got to make sure that our entire identity is not wrapped up in all this because, I mean, I've never been bullied in an online community, but I've had some rough Amazon reviews. And that can get in your head if you let it, and your whole identity is wrapped up in all of this. So it sounds like it's an unfortunate mixture of things, but I think probably a therapist and just leaving the online community would have been a better choice, which I'm sure most people agree with. Death seems extreme, faking the death.
I haven't seen much detail about what was the conversation in this online community. I mean, like you said, I can still remember 30 plus years ago, the first bad review I ever read. The first time you just think, well, who is this loser? He needs to get on board with everybody else. And then it happens again. And after a while, it stings a lot less. But apparently this online stuff was getting worse, not better.
Yeah. It can get really bad out there. And probably if there's some mental disorder already present, that probably seeped through in her interaction as well. So, at the end of the day, it's kind of a sad story, and I hope she gets the help she needs. But I would advise that probably entering back into the community is not a good idea. There is life outside the online community, and it's rich and wonderful.
Yeah, the internet hasn't gotten nicer in the past 2 years. So,
no, it has gotten way, way worse.
I mean, this is a much sort of different comparison, but there is one, Pod for Good, the podcast I do with my friend, only has 4 Apple reviews. And one of them is just 3 stars with no comments. And I think about it all the time. I'm like, you wouldn't even tell me what made it 3 stars. You're just nope, 3 stars. That's it. I think about it all the time. So
yeah, it can get in your head. It really can. The ones that always bothered me were the ones that were completely wrong. I'd write a thriller and they're like, this is not a romance. I'm like, no, I didn't write it as a romance. But you just gotta let this go. It's hard.
I can top that. Here's a review. I hope I haven't said this one before, but who knows? You notice we can all quote our bad reviews. Anyway, this is on Amazon. It's a book I did for grade school children, a biography of Lois Ada Sipule. And it doesn't matter. The point is, the review was, I didn't mean to order this book. I bought it by mistake, so I didn't read it. 1 star.
Right.
What?
They're giving themselves 1 star.
What is that a review of? It's a review of you being stupid? Man.
Those drive me crazy.
But it'll be bringing down my book numbers till the end of time. Yeah, I did not plan this commercial, I promise, but talking about this community, it makes me think about and actually be kind of proud of what we've done with WriterCon, because we've got a community of people who come to the conference every year or come to the small group workshop. We're getting ready to go on a cruise, and part of it is people have a sincere interest in writing, but part of it is also that it's a warm and supportive place where you can learn the things you need to know without people telling you that you're kidding yourself or dreaming or, any of that negativity. I wish maybe we should invite her to WriterCon. I'll check into that. That would be unexpected.
That would be amazing. I mean, I would love to hear from her directly. This would be, especially because by then some time will have passed and we could see what her life is like now. So
yeah, tell us the story. All right, enough about all this. Let's get to our guest. Lexie Elliott grew up at the foot of the Scottish Highlands, attending a local high school and spending much of her teenage years writing stories, reading, and swimming. She earned a doctorate in theoretical physics from Oxford while also on the swimming and water polo team. She worked for an investment bank. She took up triathlons, got married, had 2 boys, swam the English Channel solo, ran both marathons and ultramarathons, and found time to write novels. She's written 4 so far. Her 4th psychological thriller, her new book, Bright and Deadly Things, was released on Valentine's Day. Jesse, cue up the music. Let's get crack-a-lackin'. Lexie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I understand you are joining us today from France, is that right?
Yes, actually, I'm in Chamonix, which is not very far from where my latest book, Bright and Deadly Things, is actually set.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'll just warn our listeners that if there seems to be a slight hesitation between question and answer, it's because she's not exactly next door. Okay, Lexie, traditional first question. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
My piece of advice, and it is a question I've had before, so I do have an answer more or less at the ready. My piece of advice would be, if you want to make a career out of writing, you have to be professional about your writing. And that means you need to ring fence the time that you intend to spend, and don't let other distractions the rest of your life kind of get into that time. If you were in a job, you wouldn't just get up and leave your desk to have a coffee with a friend. You need to be as professional in your writing as you would do in any other job.
Right, I agree 100%. Okay, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, you, among many other accomplishments, have a degree in theoretical physics from Oxford. Am I right about that?
You are, yes. I have a PhD in theoretical physics. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
How do you get from theoretical physics at Oxford to novelist, thriller writer?
Well, yeah, not instantly, it would be my first point. I did always want to write. And when I got to the point of deciding what to do at university, I was kind of tossing up English or physics. And I felt that I was much more likely to get a job to pay the bills if I followed the physics route. And I thought that maybe I could, follow an interest in English and writing on the side. And I never really gave up on the dream, but, you get so busy, you're working on your undergraduate degree, then your PhD, and then you get a job, and you do have bills to pay. And really, it felt like I wasn't getting any closer to it, but it hadn't gone away. I was writing short stories in my spare time, and I was starting to have some success in short stories, won a couple of competitions. And then the global financial crisis hit, and I, like many, many others in the financial industry, lost my job. And I thought that might be a good time, whilst I was suddenly, unexpectedly, faced with having time on my hands. I thought that might be a good time to try and write a novel. And that's how I made that particular leap. But, I did write that novel, and it took me an awful long time because I had 2 young children at home. And then I went back into the workplace as well. So, it took a long time until that got published. But, here I am now, and I became a full-time writer, gave up my part-time city job a year and a half ago.
So,
Wow.
So just to encapsulate what you just said, you found theoretical physics less risky than being a writer. With that, is that about right?
Yeah, because I knew I would end up with transferable skills. Certainly the mathematical side of things was very much in demand. And through my PhD, I taught myself to code. So I had that as a string to my bow. And I don't come from the kind of background that, was going to give me a financial safety net. I was going to have to make my own way. So yes, I did think that becoming a commercial writer was a pretty long shot. And I'm thrilled to be there now, but I was right. Yes. It took a long time.
Wow. That's so interesting too. Just like the 2 sides of your brain, which is pretty unusual, I mean, I guess Bill has that too, being an attorney, but many of us are very heavy on the right side and light on the left side. It's nice to have both of those sides of the brain really engaging in the creative process. I think that's really cool. So you are, you've got children now, and you're a full-time writer. And so how do you make time for all this? What does this look like? Especially now, because I guess you worked 8 to 5 before, or whatever the times were at an office job, or did you stay at home and work? How did that all work for you, and how does it work now?
Well, before I had children, I was working in investment banking, and it certainly wasn't 8 till 5. It was full time, full on weekends. Felt like 24/7, that's for sure.
Oh, wow.
But once I had my eldest, I began working 3 days a week, and so that was much more sort of 8 till 6, I would say. And then you would log on a bit in the evenings and try not to log on the days that, you weren't meant to be working. But it did spill over a bit for sure. And then after I moved into a different firm, I got a job after the global financial crisis with an asset management firm. That was definitely a kind of 8:30 till 6 kind of job, and it stayed within those bounds. And so the 2 days where I wasn't in the office and when my kids were at school, I could devote to writing. I could write a bit at the weekends and so forth. And now my children are much older. They're 14 and 16, and they actually go to a boarding school, which I know in the US usually means you have problem children, but doesn't mean that over here in the UK. They are lovely children. And so actually I have quite a lot of time, very much my own, to do with it during the week, and I will see them at the weekends.
Yeah, and it changes as your kids change ages, doesn't it? I mean, it's just how and when they need time changes as they grow. So it's always interesting being a mom and being a writer, I think, too.
Definitely been a juggle, and it was an incredible coming up to deadlines when I was working in the city as well. And, you have a book deadline and you have kids that still need to be fed and need to be taken to whatever after school things they're going to and so forth. And that I found really difficult. And then, of course, we all hit the pandemic, and my 3 days a week were suddenly 3 days a week at home with no benefits of social interaction, because I do find the writer life quite isolating, and I did enjoy going into the office and having that contact with people and that social interaction that I think is so good for us all. And suddenly you're on the phone a lot, you're on Zoom a lot, but you weren't actually seeing people a lot. And I think that had a big bearing on thinking, yeah, actually full-time writing is maybe the direction I want to go in.
So how did you turn to thrillers?
I'm not sure that, well, maybe there are writers that do say, okay, I'm going to write a thriller. I think often debut writers just write a novel, and then somebody else tells you, oh, this is young adult, or, oh, this is a psychological thriller. And you go, oh, okay. And then they say, sure, and we like more of the same, except different. And you go, oh, okay. And then you're running down that path. And I don't know, maybe some people, as I say, really have a right, I'm going to be that kind of writer, but that's not how I started. And I don't write police procedurals, for example, where I think you would know that you were going to be on that path. I write stories where something extraordinary happens to ordinary people, not that there's a policeman or anything like that involved with it, where you might think that there's going to be book 2, 3, 4 with the same character. So yeah, I got told it was a psychological thriller and went, oh, okay, that makes sense. And yeah, but I do really, really like the structure of a mystery, shall we say, because I think it's something that really gives you great bones to build on. And if you have some themes that you want to hang on those bones and you want to investigate and you want to flesh out, you've got something really solid there that keeps the story moving, that keeps the readers interested in what you're writing, and keeps the pace, as well as allowing you to kind of, as I say, flesh out a little more. So I am quite a fan of the structure. I think I've landed in the right place.
Yeah. Well, we've talked all around this, but tell us about your new book, which I think I see lurking behind you right now, Bright and Deadly Things. What's it all about?
So Bright and Deadly Things is actually set, as I said, not very far from where I am right now, where an Oxford fellow, Emily, who has been recently deceased, she goes on a reading retreat to a very rustic chalet in the French Alps with a number of different people, some of who she knows, some of who she doesn't, and they're all drawn from different stratas of university academia, shall we say, from undergraduates through to quite senior professors. And she wants to go away to, maybe shock herself out of her grief that she's experiencing. She's aware that, she needs to do something to get maybe a bit of joie de vivre back. And this is what she would like to do. But before she even gets there, there's an intruder at her house. And when she gets to the chalets, there's some strange things going on. So, and then somebody disappears. And I'm not sure I'm going to go much further without giving spoilers away.
Well, this character you're mentioning, that's Dr. Emily Rivers, right? Who is
Correct.
a widowed Oxford Don who gets involved in all this mystery and trouble. Now, just a second ago, you were referring to series books and series characters. Is that what's going on here? Could we possibly see Dr. Rivers again sometime?
Do you know, I don't think so. I think that I've said everything I want to say, and she's where I want her to be. So I think the only way you'll come across her is reading Bright and Deadly Things again.
Well, that's an option. No, what about the publisher? I mean, have they sat down and had the talk and said, a series character might be a good idea, Lexie?
Actually, we've never had that discussion. I think they've enjoyed what I've been producing and been happy with it. And it's never been a topic of conversation for us.
So tell us about where she came from. How did you come upon her in your mind and create her and sketch her out?
Sort of have to answer that by taking a step back, because I usually approach each new project thinking about the atmosphere and the setting first. And in my head, I think it's that the characters can't really reveal themselves to me until they know what landscape they're going to be inhabiting. So I started, in fact, with the Chalet des Anglais, which features in the book and is, in fact, a real place. And I went there in the year 2000. I was lucky enough to be invited whilst I was doing my PhD at Oxford to go to this chalet. And I had a great week, really wonderful time. Nobody died. It was all absolutely fine. But it stuck in my mind because it's a very unique experience, and it is invitation only. So not everybody gets to do that. And there's no running water. There's no electricity. It's in this beautiful, beautiful part of the French Alps. And the chalet in the novel is not an exact replica, because my memory isn't so fantastic that I would get it right. And also because, sometimes I tweaked things to make it fit the story a little better. But, I hope the atmosphere of the chalet is something that I've captured and is true to the experience of going there. So I started with the chalet, and then Emily kind of came to me, and she came to me. I knew that she was already deceased. That seemed to be a feature that was instantly there. And I knew what age she was, and that she'd done a very similar academic PhD as I did. And I think it's hard maybe to fake that level of a academic degree on a subject that you don't know so well. And I never quite knew how deeply I was going to mention it in the novel. So, it seemed to make sense. Yes, okay, I understand that she's a theoretical physicist, and I can do that. I can represent that well on the page.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so one of the questions we always ask that we all find fascinating, and we know other writers do, is we like to know what other writers' system is, workday is. Do you have to have tea? Do you start early in the morning? Are you late night? What are your little things that you always do? The discipline of it all. So what does your writing workday look like?
I have to have tea. I have to have a lot of tea. English breakfast tea with milk. I reckon I'm on about 14 cups a day, which I think is okay. I don't think the caffeine level in tea is that high. But yeah, it's pretty much I finish one and then I start another. So consequently, if I'm at home, I work not very far from the cooker tap, the hot water tap. So I write at my dining table. There's a particular chair I sit in to write. And if I'm doing admin on my computer or something different, I move to the island. It's really interesting that it's clearly in my head. If I'm there, I'm writing. And if I'm doing something else, I have to move. So oddly enough, that's how that works. Yeah. And I didn't twig for a while. I was just doing it. And then I suddenly realized, yeah, that's a weird thing. But anyway, that's how that works. And the first thing I usually do each day is actually exercise, swim or run. And I do get any chores or admin done early. So often I don't sit down to write till maybe 11. And then would write till lunch, have some lunch, write afterwards. And probably stop around sort of 6. But if I've gone out to lunch with somebody instead or something, I'll work much later. So I probably end up getting the same amount done, but I don't mind still being writing at 9. I wouldn't still be writing at 11. I don't think my brain would switch off very well for sleeping if I did that. But, sometimes early in a project, it's a real struggle and I have to keep myself to strict word targets to make myself keep it going and keep the momentum. But when I get towards the end of a project, that's completely unnecessary because it's just kind of pouring out of me. And I think that's because in the early stages, you're structuring the book as much as actually getting words down. And that takes much longer to think and be careful and really, really understand, well, if I go down this route here, what the implications are and so forth. But by the time you get towards the end, what the end point is, and there's only really one way to get there, and you're kind of on the route, and it all comes out much faster.
So does that mean we have evolving terminology in the writing world, pantsers versus planners, or architects versus archaeologists, or outliners versus discovery writers? But the bottom line is, Lexie, do you outline or do you just start writing?
I outline largely because the publisher has always required me to. But I do think it's a really, really useful thing to do. And look, in every single one of my novels, barring the first one, which doesn't count because everybody produces a book and then gets a publishing contract. So it's after that I was required to write outlines. But in the later 3, shall we say, there's always been something that came up as I was writing that wasn't in the outline at all, and that makes the book better and is really just kind of evolved organically as I've been writing. And I'm very happy to go with that. And nobody's ever had a problem with that. No one's going to hold a gun to your head and say, well, you didn't produce something that looked exactly like your outline. There's a lot of understanding that you can move away from it. But it is a useful tool, and it does give you something to fall back on if you're feeling a little stuck, and you can change the outline if you've moved significantly to help you have a new blueprint towards the finish.
I'm curious about what you indicated that your publisher is asking for. Is that like a full-blown chapter by chapter outline, or just a synopsis, or what do you send them?
I send them about 5 to 7 pages. That's not the first thing I send them. Usually we start with, okay, I have an idea, and it's no more than, say, the equivalent of a blurb on the back of a book, a title and a blurb. And then if that catches the interest, like, okay, work that up a bit more. And then it's probably a 5 to 7 page outline. Not usually any longer than that, but it will have all the major characters and all the major beats in it.
So you of course are in the world of academia. And as you mentioned, you had visited the site and the environment which you set this. But what other research did you need to do for the novel?
I had to do a bit of research around the history of the chalet and the area. Not too much, but just to get a better feel. Because if you remember, it was pandemic time really when I was writing this, and I couldn't just go across and do a research trip because that's the kind of research I wanted to do. But I couldn't. So yeah, I did a bit of reading. I was really unfortunate because a very good book came out on the chalet just after I'd turned in the manuscript. I wasn't able to lean on that very, very hard. But yeah, I spoke to some people. I spoke to one of the trustees of the chalet to kind of refresh my memory on things of mine who'd also gone to the chalet, and yeah, just tried to jog my memories. And then, I'm in Chamonix fairly frequently. It's an area we like to visit as a family on holidays and skiing and in the summer. So that helps that I've got that familiarity there anyway.
Well, one last question for you, Lexie. What's next? What are you working on now?
Well, I'm working up an outline for another book. I'm not absolutely sure that it's what I'm going to write, so I'm not going to say too much about it. But yeah, I can tell you for sure Bright and Deadly Things will not be the last Lexie Elliott novel.
Yeah, well, it looks to me like it's getting a tremendous rollout. Even, the launch day of Valentine's Day, is that significant? Or did you just get a random Tuesday? But at any rate, I can do your publishers paying attention. So congratulations on your fourth book and what looks like it's going to be a major success. Congratulations to you. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. And on the Valentine's Day point, I mean, don't you think that Nothing Says I Love You like a psychological thriller?
Oh, no? Yeah. And so real, too. Thanks, Lexie.
Thank you so much for having me.
I thought that was a terrific interview, and even more impressive that we're talking to somebody who's literally on the other side of the world. Great writer, great interview. Thanks, Jesse, for making that possible. So now everybody has to forgive me for tooting my own horn, but I got this new novel coming out, the one that's hovering over my shoulder right now, if you're watching on YouTube. So can you blame me? You can pre-order The Florentine Poet, which has been called The Princess Bride Meets the Alchemist. It's a fun, fanciful journey of Pietro Bernini in Renaissance Italy. All he wants is to be a poet and to marry his beloved Sophia. But as you might imagine, there are some problems. Dan Millman, who some of you may know as the author of Way of the Peaceful Warrior, wrote this about the book. This book sparkles like a jewel in a cosmic clockwork, an uplifting gift to readers everywhere. So you see, Rene, in addition to all those bad reviews, you do occasionally get one that you like so much that you read it aloud. Anyway, take a look, if you would, at The Florentine Poet. And my pal Rene is also very busy writing. She's working on a screenplay I think is getting toward the finish line. For more information on Rene. Yeah. What?
And
What? Tell me.
I finished it. And I should mention Family Camp won Movie Guide's Best Inspirational Independent Film. So that was exciting. And
I thought you were saying Family Camp won like there was going to be a sequel. You're saying it won an award.
Yeah, the Movie Guide Award for Best Inspirational Independent Film this year.
We're talking about a movie Rene co-wrote. Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks.
Did they send you a little trophy or something?
No.
Oh.
No.
Yeah, come on. She's the writer.
I'm the writer. I didn't even go to the award.
Well, yeah, but usually they still send the writer something
No. It was just an honor to be nominated. You know what I mean?
Well, congratulations. And you can find out more about her ReneGutteridge.com or on social media. She's also a senior contributor at Writing Momentum. Okay, everybody, until next time, keep writing. Find your writing place, find your writing habit, stick with it, and remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.